We have a roster. The Patriots make some surprising moves on cut day. We'll examine here on Patscast. Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. You need a VPN? Visit expressvpn.com/Patscast to get 3 months off of a 12-month annual plan. Again, that's expressvpn.com/Patscast. The Patriots had to trim their roster down to 53 players today by 4 p.m. Eastern time, and they have done so. And they may make some more moves. They may make some more cuts. Waiver wires end at noon tomorrow, so we know Elliott Wolf, Drake Maye, and company are going to be very busy this evening as they prepare for the final 53-man roster. But at least right now, we have a taste of 95% of what we can expect from the roster of the Patriots this season. And there were some surprises and some non-surprises, starting with backup, or I guess now fourth-string quarterback, Bailey Zappi, who was released. Now, I still think Bailey Zappi is going to be back. I think this is going to be a repeat of what happened last year, where Bill Belichick released Bailey Zappi, nobody picked him up on waivers, and then he's back on the practice squad, where he actually is quite valuable. I mean, Bailey Zappi is I wouldn't say competent, but competent adjacent backup quarterback, and having him on the practice squad, on the scouting team, and being in the league for the number of years, he's now entering his third season, there is value that he can provide there, and I do hope to see him back. But as of right now, the three quarterbacks on the depth chart are, of course, Jacoby Brissett, Drake Maye, we don't know who the starter is yet, we'll get to that in a moment, and Joe Milton in the third slot. And I that's not too surprising, right? Like, Bailey Zappi was demoted twice. He was demoted behind Drake Maye early on in OTAs, and then eventually he was leapfrogged by Joe Milton over these last few weeks. So Zappi's gone. We thank him for his 4-4 record as a Patriots starting quarterback. Hopefully we don't see him start any games again. That said, I would love to still see him on the practice squad. But perhaps the biggest surprise of the day is what the Patriots did at the wide receiver position. They're keeping 7 receivers on the roster, which I'm very happy about, because picking the last guy to cut was very challenging. Kayshon Boutte, I think, has made a strong case to make the roster this year. Jalen Reagor has played pretty well at wide receiver, even though heading into camp, I saw him just as a special teams guy, but they're keeping both of them. They're keeping Javon Baker, which is not much of a surprise. You know, someone would have snagged him on waivers just because of the talent and his ability to hopefully develop in the coming years into a really strong wide receiver, and he's going to get some reps this season, even if he isn't starting. But we're looking at a receiving core right now of Tyquan Thornton, who was a shoo-in just because he had a pretty decent camp. We just hope to see it on the field for once, assuming he can stay healthy. KJ Osborne, the veteran they brought in from Minnesota. Demario Douglas, of course. Jalen Reagor, the rookie Jalen Polk, who should be in the starting lineup. And then Javon Baker and Kayshon Boutte. Not many NFL teams carry 7 wide receivers. Typically, it's 6. So this is a bit of a surprise, but a lot of depth at that position, even if there isn't one player who really stands out. Although I think Pop Douglas does stand out, and I think he has a legit shot at making the Pro Bowl this year if he's able to stay healthy for 17 games. Some other moves, Christian Barmore was added to the reserve non-football injury list, which means he is designated to return. That's good news. We really haven't heard anything about Barmore since he was diagnosed with blood clots, and this is something that could be career-ending, or it's something that he could recover from in a matter of weeks or months, and it's good to see the Patriots have left the door open for his return this season, and we certainly hope for a speedy recovery. Not a surprise here, but Kendrick Bourne, Cole Strange, and Sion Takitaki were all added to the PUP list. If you're unfamiliar with the PUP list, it's a roster designation for players who suffered football injuries prior to training camp. If you're on the PUP list, you're required to sit out the first 4 games of the season. Then after that, you have 5 weeks to return to practice. And then once you've returned to practice, you have 3 weeks to make it onto the active roster after that. not a surprise for any of these players. The only caveat I would add there is I have no idea what's going on with Kendrick Bourne and his health situation. Like, he was, my light turned out here. He was working hard in the offseason, looked pretty healthy out there, and then we just haven't seen him on the practice field. So clearly he still has a long way to go before he's able to return and be at full strength once again. But he is on the PUP list. He will not be on the active roster at least the first 4 weeks of the season. Hopefully it's a quick return after that. But, the Patriots are carrying 7 wide receivers right now. Now, presumably, 1 or 2 of those guys are going to get hurt, and this won't be an issue. But if all of those guys are healthy, they're going to have to move somebody elsewhere or cut someone to make room for Kendrick Bourne, who I still think Pop Douglas is their best receiver, but he's arguably their best receiver, and they're certainly paying him as such, and he adds kind of that boundary X-wide receiver role. He can play in the slot. He can do whatever you ask of him. Kendrick Bourne will make a real impact once he's back on the field and healthy, and he's on the team for a number of years now, so I don't think the Patriots have any incentive to rush him, especially once you consider this is a rebuilding season. Now, at the running back position, I think actually this was the biggest surprise move. I guess not much of a surprise from what we've seen in the preseason games and what we've seen out of practice the last couple of weeks, but Patriots are keeping running back JaMycal Hasty as the third RB on the depth chart, which means they cut Kevin Harris. We all kind of assumed Kevin Harris would be third on the depth chart, and then maybe they would keep a fourth around, and Hasty would be that guy. But no, they cut Harris. They also cut Terrell Jennings, who's looked pretty good the last couple of weeks, but there just wasn't room for him. So that leaves a depth chart at running back of course, Ramondre Stevenson, who's going to get most of the workload, Antonio Gibson, who's going to be a solid third down back, and then JaMycal Hasty, who's going to be able to fill in between. And Hasty really has made an impact the last couple of weeks, so I guess it's not that much of a surprise. I just really thought Kevin Harris would be on this roster and they might carry 4 running backs. But hey, you're carrying 7 receivers. Something's got to give. They're also carrying 7 cornerbacks as well. So like I said, something's got to give, and it looks like it was the running back position. But I mean, that's a pretty good unit right there. Stevenson, Gibson, who I think is the most underrated signing of the offseason, and then Hasty, who really has come into stride over the last couple of weeks. So those are your running backs, and we'll see what happens. If they feel like the workload is too much for Stevenson, then, well, Hasty is going to get a lot more reps. So we'll see how that plays out during the season. Calvin Anderson was cut in favor of Michael Jordan, not the basketball player, the offensive lineman. Michael Jordan's more of a guard, whereas Calvin Anderson, I think he can play across the line, but he's more of a tackle. There's some injury issues there with Calvin Anderson. He was recovering from malaria. Sad to see him go, but a bit of a surprise seeing Michael Jordan ultimately making the roster. But the Patriots are carrying just 9 offensive linemen right now, which is a big question once you consider how much they've struggled in recent weeks. It really struggled all of training camp, and they're still trying to figure out the best combination there, but I can't go through the full list right now, but there were a lot of tackles, a lot of guards that were cut, a lot of surprise names across the league that can be available if the Patriots want to claim them off of waivers. Again, the Patriots are third in waiver claims this year, meaning the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders will have dibs on players at first, but if they drop to number 3, then the Patriots can ideally bring in a guy who could, at the very least, line up at the tackle position and not be penalized every play like we saw with Chuks Okorafor on Sunday night. Although I don't think that's going to happen again. I think the NFL was sending a message there. But I think carrying 9 on the roster on the offensive line right now says the Patriots are not done making moves. And as Drake Maye said on WEEI this week, we may have a starting tackle, we may have a starting guard who isn't even on the roster yet. So we should have a better idea by tomorrow's podcast, so we'll be sure to cover that if the Patriots make any big additions there at the tackle spot especially. Safety Josh Bledsoe was released, and he's a guy who I just saw all over the place throughout the 3 preseason games. Not sure if he had a strong camp or not. I think he had a pretty good camp, but they decided to keep safety Del Pettis instead, who did have a very strong camp. So that was a bit of a surprise there, but Patriots are very deep at the defensive back positions, so there really wasn't much room, I guess, there for Josh Bledsoe, and they wanted to prioritize Del Pettis, who really has made a lot of strides over the last few weeks. So he gets the nod there. Shaun Wade, who's been on the team as a cornerback since 2021, was cut. That was a guy that Bill Belichick always threw out there when a cornerback went down. He's no longer on the roster, and the Patriots decided to keep late-round draft pick Marcellus Dial, the lone defensive player they drafted this year, over Shaun Wade, which means the Patriots are keeping all 8 of their draft picks. Now, I think this was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't sure they were going to cut Marcellus Dial because he was a draft choice, but he looked terrible on Sunday. He's been struggling a lot over the last couple of weeks, which is really too bad because he looked very solid at the beginning of training camp, but Patriots know the talent is there. Needs to be a little bit stickier out there, needs to work on his fundamentals. Not sure he's going to get a ton of playing time behind Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Alex Austin, Marco Wilson, and Isaiah Bolden, of course, is still on the roster too, even though he's not going to get a ton of time at the cornerback position. So he was kept, I think, just so they could develop him long-term, and you don't want to lose him to somebody else on waivers. So I guess it's not too much of a surprise. I was just surprised to see Shaun Wade go, especially with some of those other players on the roster. But, Alex Austin and Marco Wilson, these are really strong depth pieces. And I thought Shaun Wade was a strong depth piece, but he kind of is the odd man out of that group, and I understand why the Pats would want to keep Marcellus Dial. They're also keeping tight end Jaheim Bell, which means Mitchell Wilcox was cut. Jaheim Bell is was kind of the late round draft pick that they brought in. He is a tight end, but he is sort of a hybrid tight end, running back, receiver type. Not the biggest tight end that you can put out there, but he can do a little bit of everything and create a lot of options for that West Coast offense. And, they see the talent there. Austin Hooper's only on a 1-year contract. So I would expect Jaheim Bell will get some reps this season, limited reps, but ultimately he should take over the number 2 spot on that depth chart behind Hunter Henry by next season. And last but not least, Joey Sly won the kicking competition over Chad Ryland. I think this is what the Patriots were hoping for. They did put Joey Sly out there for a couple of 60-plus yard kicks, which he did not make on Sunday night's game, and I was wondering if that would factor into the decision, but the truth is both of them were neck and neck throughout training camp, but in the last week or so, Joey Sly really pulled ahead with a few bad practices coming from Chad Ryland, and it's not what you see from Chad Ryland on the practice field, right? And he has probably a much stronger leg than Joey Sly, who does have a pretty strong leg, but the Pats, Belichick drafted Chad Ryland because of his strong leg. The problem is the accuracy just disappeared in real game situations, whereas Joey Sly is a veteran and someone that they think they can rely on a little bit more. So that's your 53-man roster. Those are some of the surprise moves. Again, NFL claiming period ends tomorrow at noon Eastern, so the Pats would need to clear some additional roster spots if they want to claim some players, especially on the offensive line, especially at the tackle position. And I think there's a high likelihood that Elliott Wolf is on the phone right now working that out. And we may see a different starting tackle out there because right now it is not working. Whether you have Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, Chuks Okorafor, we haven't seen much of Caden Wallace with the starting unit, so there may be some hope there. Mike Owenu at right tackle hasn't worked out because it creates a hole at right guard. So the Pats have a lot to work on, and that's ultimately probably going to factor into who starts at the quarterback position. And I'm not going to delve too deep into this today. Listen to my last 4 or 5 podcasts where I'm talking about why Drake Maye, I think, deserves the nod over Jacoby Brissett. But I will leave you with this. Who do you feel more comfortable with at the quarterback position on 3rd and long? When you're at 3rd and 14, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9, and you need to make a deep play, or you need to improvise, or you need a quarterback who's going to make a play with their legs when nobody's open, when the pocket is breaking down, Who do you feel most comfortable with in that situation? And up until I saw Drake Maye this preseason, I really haven't been comfortable with the Patriots at quarterback on 3rd and long since Tom Brady, who I was very comfortable with, right? He had 3 3rd and longs in that overtime drive against the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2018 AFC title game, and Brady just converted on all of them, and that's part of what made Tom Brady so great. On those desperate situations, he could make plays when he needed to, and he didn't have the mobility of a quarterback like Drake Maye, but never felt comfortable with Cam Newton on 3rd and long, even though he could make plays with his legs. Teams always had a spy out there, and they had to rely on his arm, and we know what Cam Newton's arm looked like. Mac Jones, the problem with Mac Jones was if you didn't at least get it to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, you might as well just punt on 3rd down, because 3rd and long was a lost situation with Mac Jones out there, and that's really how the Patriots ran the offense. They almost always ran it on 1st down to get at least a couple of yards to make it a little bit easier on Mac Jones when he had to throw longer on 2nd or 3rd down and at least have some more short yardage situations. That was always a nightmare with Mac Jones. Never felt confident with him on 3rd and long. And then there's, of course, Jacoby Brissett, who I think can convert a little more efficiently on 3rd and long than the 2 quarterbacks that I just mentioned. But he's a pocket passer now, not going to be able to make plays with his legs. And maybe occasionally he can, but not the Jacoby Brissett we saw as a rookie, where they were essentially running the Wildcat offense with him when Jimmy Garoppolo went down. That's not the Jacoby Brissett we see out there nowadays. And I see him on 3rd and long in these preseason games, and I think maybe there's a chance to convert, but overall, probably not going to happen. Whereas with Drake Maye, it's like Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, he's not Patrick Mahomes yet, or maybe never will be, but 3rd and 14 or 3rd and 17 on his own goal line the other day, made a play with his legs, ran the ball for 20, 25 yards or whatever it was, got the 1st down. He's making great plays downfield, those play-action bootlegs that Alex Van Pelt really relies on. He hit one of those on a great pass to Jalen Polk on Sunday night. This is a quarterback that's going to bail this team out of bad situations, out of a bad offensive line, out of 3rd and long situations, out of penalty situations where it looks like the team is driving and now suddenly they're dealing with a 2nd and 15 or a 3rd and 15. Drake Maye at least gives you some hope in those dire situations that you can keep the drive going, which he did on Sunday night. I mean, that first touchdown drive was hampered by penalties. They still scored a touchdown. There should have been a 2nd touchdown drive, which was hampered by penalties, and a touchdown was ultimately called back because, of course, Chuks Okorafor was lining up illegally for the 3rd time of the game. Drake Maye can do that, and there aren't many quarterbacks in the NFL who you really feel comfortable with on 3rd and long. There's Josh Allen, there's Patrick Mahomes, there's Justin Herbert, maybe Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. You know, there's some solid quarterbacks in this league, but I would say there's maybe 10 or so that you can feel comfortable with in 3rd and long situations. And even if Drake Maye is still developing and has a long way to go and doesn't belong in that conversation as an elite quarterback, he can be in that top 10 on guys you can rely on in desperate situations. Now, he needs to improve on the 2-minute drills, the 1-minute drills, pre-snap, just far too many fumbles in the preseason and throughout training camp. Jacoby Brissett has been more efficient in practice in 2-minute drills, but Drake Maye was driving the team downfield on a 2-minute drill the other day, and it would have been a touchdown if it weren't for that Chuks Okorafor penalty. So, in real game situations, I trust him a lot more, and what you see on the practice field is not what you get in games, because the Patriots are trying to teach Drake Maye to stay in the pocket, to not rely solely on his college instincts, to extend plays with his legs, to throw on the run, do all those things that he's so great at. But when the play breaks down, you need a quarterback who can do that, and that is Drake Maye. So we'll see if we get news this evening, tomorrow, later this week on who the starting quarterback will be. We know those are some tough conversations going on right now. Jerod Mayo doesn't seem to be the primary decision maker. It seems to be collaboration with him and Elliott Wolf and Alex Van Pelt and T.C. McCartney and Ben McAdoo and a bunch of other coaches on the offensive staff. Somebody's got to make that final call, but Drake Maye has outplayed Jacoby Brissett And Jerod Mayo has acknowledged that. The question is whether or not they want to put him out there behind that offensive line and risk injury early on in the season, going against really good defenses like the Bengals, the Seahawks, the Jets, and the 49ers. But it doesn't get any easier after that, right? You still have the Dolphins and the Texans. Then you're looking at week 7 or 8 for Drake Maye, and then it's a lost season at this point. I say you throw him out there week 1 and understand, the quarterback that you're going to put out there is going to take hits. But Drake Maye is one of those quarterbacks that needs to take hits to get his head in the game. He just seems like one of those guys who gets better the more experience he has, the more plays he has, the more he learns. And I think he's not a mental head case like the last quarterback and can bounce back. And that really was the story throughout his college career. And that's been the story throughout this preseason with all the penalties, all the negative yardage situations on the ground. Drake Maye has been able to transcend that, and I think that's why he deserves to be the starting quarterback of this team. But we will see. Going to be a lot more Patriots coverage this week. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel on YouTube, and hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you throughout the week.